When we talk about a woman risking everything for a man, her heart, her emotional safety, sometimes even her sense of independence, what we're really talking about is trust, and at the center of that trust is one crucial trait: emotional certainty. A woman needs to feel that no matter how chaotic the world gets, you remain grounded, anchored, and deeply secure in who you are. That's what makes you different. That's what makes you unforgettable. Emotional certainty isn't loud. It doesn't posture or brag. It's not about having all the answers, and it's definitely not about control. It's a calm internal power that says, I know who I am, and I won't collapse under pressure. This kind of man doesn't flinch when she's vulnerable. He doesn't run when conflict arises. He doesn't seek validation in her reactions because he doesn't need her to be okay in order to feel okay himself. And that, right there, is magnetic. Think about it. So many women live in a constant state of emotional overextension. They carry the weight of their families, their careers, their past traumas, often without being given the space to breathe. When she meets a man who can hold her emotionally without trying to fix or judge her, something profound shifts. She starts to feel safe, not because you're offering her solutions, but because your presence alone is stable enough to make her feel like she can finally exhale. And this isn't just about being stoic, it's about being attuned. Emotional certainty means you don't overreact when she's emotional, you don't shut down when things get complicated, you listen without defensiveness. You respond with maturity, not ego. Your inner world is well managed, and that makes her feel like she doesn't have to manage you too. That's the kind of emotional presence that makes a woman lower her guard, and once that guard is down, intimacy deepens on every level. The truth is, women don't want perfection. They want presence. They want a man who knows his values, who doesn't shift with the wind, who has done the inner work and stands tall, not just physically, but emotionally. And when she sees that in you, she begins to feel something rare, that she can risk being her full self with you. And when a woman feels that, she'll do things even she didn't think she was capable of. Because she's not just falling for your words, she's falling into the security of your essence. That's when she chooses you not just with her heart, but with her trust, her loyalty, her vulnerability, her whole self. So ask yourself, are you a man who brings chaos or one who creates calm? Are you moved by every emotional storm, or do you remain rooted no matter what she's feeling? Because if you want her to risk everything for you, you must become the kind of man who never risks abandoning himself. When you embody that kind of certainty, she'll stop second, guessing and start leaning in fully, freely, and fearlessly. If there's one thing women are relentlessly drawn to, especially on a level that bypasses logic and taps into something primal, it's consistency. Not charm, not money, not even good looks, but consistency. And here's why it's so powerful. In a world full of broken promises, shifting intentions, and half-hearted efforts, consistency is the rarest and most underrated form of attraction. It creates safety, it creates reliability, and most importantly, it builds emotional momentum. Now let's be honest. Anyone can impress someone once. Anyone can show up with the right words, the right energy, and the right actions for a day, maybe even a week. But consistency is what separates the man who is temporarily exciting from the man who becomes emotionally indispensable. Why? Because when you're consistent, you're not just sending a message, you're reinforcing it. Over and over again, and the female psyche responds deeply to that reinforcement. Think about how the feminine energy is wired. It thrives in rhythm, in cycles. It's emotionally attuned and constantly scanning for patterns. A woman may not always remember exactly what you said or what you wore, but she will always remember how you made her feel, especially if that feeling was consistent. That emotional reliability begins to feel like home to her, and once you feel like home, she will begin to trust you in ways that transcend logic. But here's the mistake many men make. They show consistency when it's easy, when they are in the mood, when the relationship is fresh. But real consistency shows up when life gets messy, when you're tired, stressed, or unsure, and yet you still show up. you still listen, you still respect her emotional process. That's when a woman begins to feel that your intentions are not driven by convenience, but by character. What women are really looking for isn't perfection, it's alignment. They want your words, your actions, your energy, all to be saying the same thing over time. That's where trust is born, and when a woman feels that trust consistently reinforced, she begins to do what very few people in this world are willing to do. She lets go. She lets go of her emotional guard. She lets go of the backup plans. She stops measuring your actions and starts believing in your presence. The truth is, consistency isn't glamorous. It's not always exciting, but it is transformative. It builds the foundation upon which deep emotional intimacy is constructed, and once that foundation is solid, a woman will begin to risk everything, not because she has to, but because she wants to. Because what she sees in you is rare, and the feminine heart will always chase what feels rare. So ask yourself this: can she count on you, even when you can't count on your own mood? Are you stable when the world is not? Because if your consistency can hold firm under pressure, she will start to believe you're not just a passing moment, you're a future. And when a woman sees her future in you, she'll stop protecting herself from you, and that's when everything changes. When a man validates a woman's emotional reality, not by fixing it, not by brushing it off, but by truly witnessing it, he steps into a space few dare to enter. He becomes emotionally fluent in a world that often silences women's feelings, and when that happens, something profound unfolds. She begins to breathe, not just physically, but emotionally, because for many women, emotional expression is not just communication, it's connection. It's how they feel seen, valued, and deeply understood. You see, society has conditioned women to constantly monitor their emotional temperature. Don't be too sensitive. You're overreacting. Just calm down. Over time, these messages teach her that her emotions are a liability. So, when she finds a man who doesn't flinch when she's vulnerable, who doesn't dismiss her when she's overwhelmed, and who holds space for her without trying to solve or silence her, he becomes more than just a partner. He becomes a safe space. Let's break this down further. Emotional validation isn't about agreeing with everything she feels. It's about acknowledging that what she feels is real to her. If she's hurt, don't tell her she's being dramatic. If she's confused, don't jump into solution mode. What she wants is presence, and presence is rare. Presence says, I'm here. I may not fully understand what you're feeling, but I respect that you're feeling it. Now here's where it gets even deeper. When a woman's emotional reality is consistently validated, she starts to drop the masks she wears for survival. She stops editing herself. She stops tiptoeing around your moods. She trusts that her inner world won't be met with judgment, but with curiosity and care. And that kind of trust, when nurtured, creates intimacy that sex alone can never build. But most men aren't taught how to validate emotions. They're taught to perform, to provide, to fix. So when a woman presents a storm of emotions, their instinct is to shut it down or walk away. But a different kind of man, a rare man, leans in. He listens without the itch to interrupt. He hears not just her words, but the emotion underneath them. And in doing so, he gives her something she may never have had before: emotional freedom. This kind of freedom changes everything. Because when a woman feels emotionally safe, she begins to express her deepest desires, her rawest fears, and her wildest dreams. She doesn't hold back. She doesn't protect herself from you. And in that vulnerability, a new form of closeness is born, one that's sacred, sustaining, and fiercely magnetic. So if you want a woman to risk everything for you, learn to speak the unspoken language of emotional validation. Listen when it's hard, hold space when it's messy, and never underestimate the power of simply saying, I hear you, and it's okay to feel that way. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can give a woman isn't an answer, it's permission to feel. And once you do that consistently, you won't just have her heart, you'll have her trust, and trust, once earned, becomes the bond she's willing to sacrifice everything to protect. When a man genuinely supports a woman's growth, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, he enters a league of his own. You see, most people only show up for who you are, not who you're becoming, but the kind of man who sees her not only for her present, but also for her potential, that man earns a level of devotion that runs deeper than words. Because, for a woman, feeling truly seen isn't just about being admired for her beauty or charm. It's about being acknowledged for her evolving self, her dreams, her intellect, her ambition, and her inner fire. Let's make this clear. Supporting a woman's growth isn't about taking control or dictating her path. It's about nurturing her expansion, cheering her on when she doubts herself, holding her accountable to her own greatness, and creating space where her voice, her choices, and her evolution are respected. That space is sacred, and sadly, many women have never truly experienced it. In a world that often tells women to shrink to be quiet, agreeable, or non-threatening, a man who says, grow, take up space, challenge me, evolve, is like oxygen to a soul that's been holding its breath. He doesn't feel threatened by her success. He doesn't compete with her ambition. He celebrates it because he understands that true partnership isn't about dominance. It's about mutual elevation. Now, here's the psychological depth we often overlook. When a woman feels safe enough to grow in your presence, she begins to associate you with that transformation. And that's not just symbolic. It's emotional imprinting. She connects her progress with your presence. You become a pillar in her story, a catalyst, a witness to her becoming, and that is something no material gift can replicate. Think about it. When a woman knows that the man beside her isn't intimidated by her strength, but rather inspired by it, she blossoms, she opens, she brings more to the relationship, more depth, more creativity, more passion. And not because she has to, but because she wants to. Because her environment, the emotional atmosphere you've created, gives her permission to be fully alive. And here's the nuance: you don't have to be perfect. You don't need all the answers, but you do need to be intentional. Pay attention to what excites her, be curious about her aspirations, ask her what she needs to thrive, and then be the man who makes it easier, not harder, for her to pursue those things. That's what separates ordinary support from transformational support. A woman will risk everything for the man who doesn't just love who she is today, but who also deeply believes in who she could become tomorrow. So if you truly want to leave a lasting impact, don't just admire her beauty. Invest in her brilliance, because the man who empowers her growth doesn't just win her loyalty, he earns a place in her evolution. And that, gentlemen, is where true intimacy begins. When a man protects a woman's emotional well-being, not through control, but through presence, empathy, and emotional responsibility, he creates a space where she can finally let her guard down. In today's world, so many women are walking through life armored up, not because they want to be hard, but because they've had to be, because the cost of vulnerability has too often been betrayal, dismissal, or emotional abandonment. So when a woman encounters a man who doesn't mock her sensitivity or weaponize her emotions against her, but instead treats her feelings as something sacred, everything shifts. It's not about agreeing with everything she feels. It's about honoring that what she feels is real to her. And when a woman feels emotionally protected, she doesn't just trust you more. She begins to trust herself more in your presence. There's a certain strength in a man who knows how to hold emotional space. The kind of man who doesn't flinch when a woman is in pain, the kind of man who doesn't respond to her tears with discomfort or distance, but with stillness, attention, and care. That man sends a powerful message: you are safe here, even in your mess. You don't have to edit yourself for me. And this is where emotional intelligence and masculine strength beautifully intersect. Because make no mistake, this isn't about being passive, it's about being rooted. A man who is rooted emotionally doesn't react from ego. He responds from presence. He doesn't dismiss her fears or belittle her struggles. Instead, he helps her regulate them, not by fixing her, but by simply being with her in a way that says, "You are not alone in this." Philosophically, this is about radical acceptance. And that's not just love. It's emotional leadership, because true emotional safety isn't created by promises. It's proven through consistency. The consistency of how you show up when she's vulnerable. The consistency of how you speak to her when she's triggered. The consistency of how you respect her boundaries even when they're inconvenient for you. And over time, this consistency becomes transformational. She begins to feel like she can exhale around you. She no longer needs to perform strength. She no longer fears judgment for her softness, and in that safe emotional climate, she becomes more generous, more trusting, more invested. Because the man who protects her heart earns something most others never will, unfiltered access to her soul. The truth is, most women aren't looking for perfection. They're looking for protection, not just physically, but emotionally. They want to know that their vulnerability won't be used as ammunition later, that their softness won't be mistaken for weakness, and when they find a man who understands this, they don't just love him, they fight for him. They stand by him, they take risks for him, because in him they see a refuge. So, if you want a woman to go all in for you, protect not just her body or her reputation, but her heart. Because the man who safeguards a woman's emotional world is the man she will never forget. When a man embraces authentic purpose, it radiates in a way that women intuitively respond to. And I'm not talking about being rich, powerful, or having some flashy 5-year plan. I mean a man who is deeply rooted in something greater than himself, a man whose decisions, energy, and presence are driven by a clear internal compass, not external validation. That kind of man, he stands out. Because he's not chasing, he's becoming, and that changes everything. Women can feel when a man is anchored, when his life is led by intention rather than impulse, when his words aren't just charming, but carry weight, because they're backed by integrity. Purpose gives a man a kind of quiet magnetism. He doesn't need to prove himself, his alignment does it for him. It shows in how he speaks, how he walks into a room, how he treats others, even how he handles rejection or failure. And for a woman who's emotionally intelligent, that kind of man is irresistible. Purpose gives your presence depth, and depth is what makes a woman stay. She may be drawn in by your looks or your confidence, but if there's no why behind your who, she'll eventually drift. Because surface-level attraction can only sustain interest for so long. What keeps her invested is the sense that being near you elevates her, that your vision invites her into something richer, that her femininity isn't diminished by your purpose, but made more powerful in its presence. Now, here's where most men go wrong. They confuse ambition with purpose. Ambition says, "I want to win." But purpose says, "This is who I am even when no one's watching." One is fueled by ego, the other by essence. And women can tell the difference. The man who's truly living in his purpose doesn't manipulate, doesn't compete unnecessarily, and doesn't fold when things get hard. He's resilient because his mission is bigger than any single moment. Philosophically, this is about existential alignment. It's about creating a life where your inner truth and outer actions are not in conflict. And emotionally, this offers a woman certainty, not the certainty of outcomes, but the certainty of character. And when a woman sees that in a man, she will move mountains to support him, stand beside him, and build with him, not because he's perfect, but because he's real, and committed to something that transcends temporary desire. Ultimately, women are not just drawn to power, they are drawn to direction, to conviction, to a man whose purpose is not a performance, but a practice. That's when loyalty becomes effortless. That's when connection becomes sacred. Because she's not just loving the man in front of her, she's loving the meaning he brings into her life. So here's the truth. If you want a woman to risk everything for you, don't ask her to. Give her something worth risking it for. Let your purpose be so alive, so present, so authentic, that choosing you feels like choosing clarity, and in a world full of noise, that kind of man becomes her quiet certainty.